So one thing I got cut off before I could mention in that last video was that the body image, when we objectify our own body, never really exists um, on its own. It's always immersed within our lived experience of our bodies first. So first we experience our bodies as ourselves and ourselves as our bodies, and then we experience our body as an object, um, only because we experience our body. So the objectification of the body is the second layer of abstraction, in other words, and we are always embodied first. Um, so I'm going to quote one sentence here where Thompson sums up basically what a science of consciousness must account for. He says, any scientific account of consciousness must meet these two criteria. It must account for the ways in which one's body is intentionally directed toward the world, and it must account for a form of self-awareness that does not imply identification of one's body as an object. So, the science is going to account for consciousness. It can't do so by identifying the body as an object. The body is a subject object. It's not just another material body as material bodies are conceived of in physical science. That is, material bodies that are machine-like. Each part is exterior to every other part, and they interact only through, the exchange of forces. So the body isn't one of those, though. The body feels itself from the inside. So, and its parts continually produce themselves, each other, and the membrane that encases them and defines them as an identity, as an organism, as a whole system. So yeah, the body isn't just an object. The body is a lived experience. There is a subject in the object that is a body, but it's a subject before it's an object. Especially when you consider it from your view as the observer and haver of all this knowledge about reality. You are a body, and you are living that body, and your knowledge comes through the body. The knowledge is made available because your body is not just an object in the world, but in fact is your experience of the world. So, not only can you not reduce consciousness to the brain, you can't reduce the body to your concept to the scientific concept of inorganic matter. Physiology is fundamentally different than physics and chemistry. And as I said in the prior video about entropy, entropy is really a very specific circumstance that doesn't give us any understanding of the more general picture of matter. In other words, the second law of thermodynamics was arrived at by studying closed systems in laboratories, controlled in a contained, controlled environment. But most systems in nature are open and chaotic, unpredictable, and astonishingly creative, it turns out. They evolve, and they become more complex as they evolve, which what we understand about matter from our examination of it contained in the laboratory seems rather strange, because in the laboratory matter falls apart. And certainly, in the world, if you build a house on a steep hill, eventually it's going to fall down the hill. It's a matter of time, really. This is true. And yet, who built the house? A living being, right? And this planet is itself a living being. But even if you don't buy that, there's still life crawling all over its surface. As deep as 5 kilometers below the surface, at least. And as high as the clouds. Microorganisms hitch a ride out of the ocean to the clouds all the time. So most of the planet is living. That seems to be a distinct, not only a distinct possibility for life, but we have to assume, because we ourselves gather our knowledge of the material world through our bodies. We are first living matter, and then we gather knowledge about what we call inorganic matter. So our experience of anything is always already alive, because we are alive. So basically, most systems in nature are open. Most systems in nature are living or exhibit a strong tendency to organize, to self-organize, which, we don't have to see these things as contradicting with entropy when we recognize entropy as a special case. We can speculate about the nature of the universe as a whole. We don't know if it's, contained. So we don't know if entropy holds for the universe as a whole. It could be an open universe. So it's basically, the shift here is from a philosophy of, or science, and a philosophy of mechanism, which has held sway for the last 150 years or so, at least, to a philosophy of organism, which you could argue held sway for the entire history of the human species prior to the scientific revolution. Our philosophy of organism today would be a little bit more sophisticated, but it would admit the same fundamental truth that all pre-modern cultures understood, which was that man and nature are not ultimately separate categories. Consciousness and the physical world do not exist independently of one another. So it is reviving a shade of animism. It is true, but it is an animism we can understand in a rational way. We don't have to be worried about entirely unpredictable things happening. The world, for the most part, is pretty orderly, but there are always surprises, which is why there's this thing called evolution, and we should be happy about the surprises because they're quite creative. So it's just moving away from mechanism and toward organism, which I think fits the facts of experience far better. I certainly don't feel like a machine, and I bet most of you don't either. I can't be sure, but I bet